Yo, what's going on everyone? SixPathsDunga back again with another chapter review. As you guys can see, Boruto TBV VORTEX chapter 27 has officially released today. So I had to go ahead and drop this one for y'all because of course we have a lot to talk about. Don't forget to go read the original version. Go support Ikimoto for giving us peak month after month. But without further ado, let's hop right into it. So the cover for this chapter is going to be Inojin. Very controversial depending on who you ask. But as for me, I could care less about the chapter cover, especially since the content that's actually in the chapter is so good. I mean, I kinda like it though. It gives the audience a new perspective on Inojin. It's not a crazy statement to say that we view him in a completely different light than we did at the beginning of the story. I feel like fans take him a bit more seriously now because of the impact that he's going to have on the future of the planet. And that's all I can really say on that. So the chapter begins exactly where we left off from chapter 26. And I mean literally. Damon still has his hands around both of Sarada and Sumere's neck. But it ends up being a bit different than everyone else expected because Ada, the one who everyone thought was going to tell Damon to stop, didn't exactly tell him to stop. He just stopped on his own. So the whole time it was basically just a warning for both of them. Reminding them and reminding us that no matter how strong the likes of characters like Sarada, Kawaki, and Boruto has gotten recently, Damon is still the top dog. Ikimoto wanted to remind us of this, because seeing Sarada one-shot Ryu, seeing Kawaki hang with Jura, even going as far as to damage him, some fans had some speculation that these characters could probably contend, or in some rare cases, even defeat the likes of Damon. This panel was made to remind us that isn't reality as of yet. Even Damon says it himself. He tells both of the girls that basically if he wanted to, he could mop the floor with both of them without even trying. So fast they wouldn't even realize what had happened. Straight up just widening the gap between Damon's pure power and everyone else's. So after the situation calmed down a bit, Ada starts chiming in, wondering how exactly it's possible for them to not be charmed by her omnipotence power, even though both Sarada and Sumere aren't Otsutsuki. And one thing I like that the chapter did was debunk all the other theories that the community came up with to explain why that is. For example, at first I personally used to believe the reason they weren't affected was because of the love theory. They both have romantic feelings for Boruto, who is an Otsutsuki, and this is reflected through their immunity to omnipotence. But it turns out that this theory does have some inconsistencies, because it was proven that Sarada was immune before she even discovered her true feelings for Boruto. And of course you can argue that even though she herself didn't realize it, or couldn't make out what these feelings actually were, her heart was in love with Boruto the whole time. But at the same time, that can also be inconsistent, because Ada says there are plenty of girls in the village who have had their hearts in a flutter for either Boruto or Kawaki. So if that's the only reason, then by all logic there should be more girls who aren't affected. So even though that is a noticeable theory that made so much sense that they even mentioned it in the story, it still doesn't cover the real reason they aren't affected. The real reason lies with Ada herself. She figures out that she subconsciously made an exception to the both of them when she casted omnipotence, according to her own desire. She thought back to when she first met Sarada and Sumere, and when Sarada told her that she just wanted to be normal friends. This is the moment that made Ada truly desire and cherish their friendship, because this is something she always desired deep down. She always wanted friends who just seen her as what she was and not because her power forced them to. So this interaction ended up being extremely important for the future of the story, as a power such as omnipotence that works off taking one's deepest desire and making it a reality. This isn't the only answer to their immunity to omnipotence. It could also be a hint for the long-term solution to omnipotence. In other words, finding a way on how to reverse it for Boruto to get his life back. So Ada returns to her heartfelt conversation with Sarada and Sumere, and she states that after all this time, she didn't think that they had the intention to harm her, but she was so moved by their loyalty and friendship that she wouldn't be mad if they were the ones to kill her. They finally given her what she wanted all her life. She's forever grateful for them. I don't know how Damon feels about this though. Like, you can tell he doesn't really care for what Ada says right here. It's almost like a, yeah, I dare you, to Sarada and Sumere. Like I said, I think it really doesn't matter. As long as Damon is there, nobody's really going to be touching Ada so easily. But I digress. We then see Sarada grabbing Sumire and kind of running towards Ada. But it's not what you think. She actually went in to give her a nice warm embrace. Ada questions this at first, but Sarada just says it's the way she shows her friendship. She was so moved by Ada's words, she just had to hug her. I feel that she better understands Ada. She realizes that seeing through her crazy godlike power, she's just an ordinary teenage girl with ordinary teenage desires. She wants friends, she likes to go shopping, she likes gossip and drama, she has a crush on a boy. It's really no different than your average girl, except she now bears an unwanted power that limits the way she can interact with people. So we can tell from this scene, Sarada finally sees Ada for her. And from this interaction, I can tell their relationship has grown extraordinary. All that unwarranted tension between them, wondering if they were friend or foe, is lifted now. Sumire chimes in and agrees. It's nice to risk your life for friendship. It's kind of exciting. They continue to hug for a while Damon just continues to sit there like the menace he is, just smirking. I swear this boy is funny, like really. So anyway, this is gonna end up being super important for the future. And of course you guys can expect a video on that sometime this month because I have a lot to say regarding this topic. But for the sake of the video, we gotta move on. So after this conversation comes to an end, we move on to KASHIN Koji's point of view as he gets ready to explain the abilities of Mamushi. So this conversation is yet another one that was carried over from the last chapter. Koji reveals Mamushi's primary ability is the power to split apart. He states that there's almost no limit to how many times he can split his body. Immediately, Boruto chimes in and asks a question that most of us were wondering just from hearing this ability. Is it like shadow clones? And obviously it is quite different from shadow clones because unlike shadow clones, all these clones are quote unquote the real body, which means there's no chakra split among the clones. His chakra and physical strength isn't divided among the number of clones he produces. Every single one of his clones are as powerful as the original. So basically, as Shikamaru says, the ability is just to split apart at full strength. But even though he doesn't lose any power while splitting his body, the ability does have a weakness, like every ability, and that involves his intelligence. You see, it's not the power that decreases with every clone, it's his intelligence, meaning the more clones, the dumber he gets. So therefore, no matter what Mamushi does, summon 100 clones or maybe like 10, there's advantages in both of these scenarios. Because as Koji says, when he produces too many clones, his intelligence drops. Therefore, his attack starts to become more simplified, and his pain tolerance reduces. In other words, making the fight easier. So Shikamaru says that they should just let him multiply until he starts to act a fool, and then just deal with all of them all at once. And Koji agrees. However, they absolutely cannot forget this one rule when fighting him. They have to crush his Rinnegan once they defeat a clone, because a body that has lost its eyes can no longer split apart, which means this power most likely resides in his Rinnegan specifically. But still be careful, because once you start to defeat the clones, his intelligence will recover, therefore making him harder to deal with. But the pros to this is basically that they can keep track of his movements, which means it'll be easier to keep Ada away from him. But if there's too many, even though they'll probably be fodder, there'll be too many to keep an eye on. So then Koji says the plan is to keep around 20 to 30. That's the sweet spot. At that point, it'll be like just fighting a wild animal. If you make sure there's at least this amount of clones on the battlefield, you'll make the fight manageable and still be able to keep an eye on the clones and successfully keep him away from Ada. So these are all the conditions in order for them to win the battle. This chapter kind of shows us what we should be looking forward to in the battle against Mamushi. So it makes it easier for content creators to kind of gauge how the fight is gonna go and who will be included. I actually have several video ideas going over who I think will be very important in this fight. But just as a sneak peek, I think the main characters that first come to mind when I think of who will be key in this fight against Mamushi is gonna be Sarada, Kawaki, and surprisingly Himawari. I believe they have the best arsenal to deal with him, and it's not even close. But despite that, everyone will have a role to play in this upcoming chapter, not just those three. So getting back into the video, now we know how Konoha plans to deal with Mamushi. The plan is laid out, but there are still some logical concerns that the likes of Shikamaru and Inojin ask Koji. like the possibility of a clone being left back at the Shinju dimension, away from the rest that are attacking Konoha. And if that's the case, you always have a clone that is safe, therefore making him unbeatable. Ikimoto is actively trying to avoid any type of plot holes in the story, so this must be addressed because this would be something the community would find out anytime. So he responds that this is impossible for Mamushi because his other parts have a property that causes them to swarm together. So even if he plans to leave one on standby, it should instinctively flock towards where the rest are located. So that right there changes everything. It gives Konoha a way to win. This ability is simply broken. That's why you introduce some limitations to create balance. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any way they could defeat the Shinju. I really like this ability. I feel like it's one of the more interesting powers in the story, and it's gonna create a big payoff next chapter, because this is a problem that can't just be solved by 1 or 2 people. Since Mamushi can clone himself multiple times, this creates a scenario where you should have around 3 to 4 fighters just to keep track of all of them at once. Remember, it's not like shadow clones where you just deal with a big number of weaker versions of your opponents. Every one of these clones have the same strength and power of the original. The same being that was able to press Boruto and send him flying back into the wall. Mamushi's physical strength is enough trouble by itself, but if you have multiple of these things, regardless of the intelligence level, it can prove to be a problem. So after we resolve this clear problem that Mamushi's ability presents, Inojin asks why is it logical to fight in Konoha. If they know he's gonna come, then why don't they just intersect him and take care of him then and there? But what Inojin doesn't know is that it's better to fight in Konoha, because that creates another restriction for Mamushi. He explains that when they fight in Konoha, it keeps Jura from intervening in this fight. He's after Boruto and Himawari, so in order to keep both of them safe, it's necessary to fight in Konoha. Remember, Jura has taken a liking to Konoha's culture. He makes frequent visits to sweet shops and bookstores, so he refuses to fight in Konoha to keep from destroying that culture. And this creates a limitation for Mamushi because he's well aware of this, and he doesn't want to make Jura mad or anything, so he might also be hesitant of fighting in Konoha. So the only option is for them to challenge him to a fight, because even though his fear of Jura is still there, yes, even if he becomes an idiot, his instinct to devour Ada will also still be there. So there's nothing to keep him from coming to Konoha. So the story's just plain out letting us know all the rules and requirements for this plan to be successful. Well, that's as far as the fighting goes. There is still some precautions that need to be took to ensure their survival. And surprisingly, this precaution involves Inojin. Like I said earlier, we don't view Inojin as the same as we did earlier in the series. And what I mean by this is basically because of his new alliance with Boruto and Koji. He became important because of his abilities. Mind transmission, his closeness with Himawari, all that plays into account of his role in the series and how he accepts this role. So Koji now wants Inojin to learn a new jutsu. He states that this jutsu is going to be a great help in this upcoming battle, pivotal if you will. He states that it's a jutsu that is backwards compatible with mind transfer jutsu. So that's just to give you guys a hint of what it'll be. And because of this jutsu, that's why Koji wanted Inojin. He has to master this ability in 2 days before Mamushi comes to Konoha. I mean, at first Inojin seems really intimidated. 2 days is so little time to learn a new ability, so it's not easy to just take all that information in and be successful. So Koji reassures him, stating that he should be able to do it because he himself has developed this jutsu in order to enact vengeance for Himawari. So actually it turns out this is an ability that Inojin mastered because of Himawari's death in another timeline. So after that, he was locked in. His eyes have changed and everything. Now he realizes what's at stake. So to avoid this future, he says that he'll master it in 1 day tops. That just tells you how powerful love is. He really wants to protect Himawari, and it shows. So this ends up concluding that scene, and of course we will dive into every single aspect of this conversation in later videos. So that's just kind of a reminder for you guys to subscribe and turn on them post notifications so you don't miss these videos. So moving on from that conversation, we see Kawaki for the first time in 3 chapters, and he's here with a model looking over footage of when he fought Jura. From what they're saying, it's apparent that they're looking for potential weaknesses that Jura has or may have, just different ways they can potentially kill him. So Amato states the obvious things, like him being immortal because of the divine tree healing his injuries. Then we see Kawaki gets a little heated when Amato states that he's immortal, because in Kawaki's eyes, he's beatable. As someone who fought him, he knows that he can be beat, but not with his current level of power. He states that he needs more power to beat Jiraiya. So Amato directly just straight up says, it's not a good idea gaining more power than this, because your body could potentially give out on you. And from this next panel, we can see, yeah, Kawaki did not like that at all. Like everyone likes to do apparently, he starts roughing up Amato. I have to say, as a guy who can shut down all these cyborgs and, you know, give them more power, they treat him like garbage. Code, Delta, Kawaki, Ada, Damon, they all just don't like him all too much. But anyway, Kawaki roughs him up and he talks about Akabe again, stating that he should just do what he says if he wants to reunite with his daughter. He'll either kill them first or they'll kill him. But if he doesn't get this power, he can't win anyway, so the planet is still doomed either way. So Amato really has no choice but to place his bets on him. And this also confirms that Amato may have been holding out on Kawaki's power, especially when he states that if he gains any more power, then his body will give out, even before he fights Jiraiya. So now we know Kawaki is going to get an even crazier power up, and I simply can't wait to see that. I know everyone's gonna call Kawaki an upgrade merchant, making fun of him because he was gifted all his power, not really working for any of it. And I gotta say, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but all I gotta say is, it goes with his character. So now this basically confirms that when Mamushi arrives, Kawaki is expected to be even stronger than when he fought Jiraiya. That's gonna be absolutely crazy. I really want to know how much power Amato held out from Kawaki. And the fact that he's already stronger than Boruto, and now he's gonna get even stronger, I think that has to be confirmation that we're gonna see a power up for Boruto very soon. It has to be, bro. So moving back to the Hokage mansion, we see Konohamaru getting interrogated by Lord Kobu about the Boruto situation. Like last chapter, he's still trying to figure out the mole that aided Boruto in his escape from the interrogation room. So here it is yet again, the story is just carrying over a narrative from last chapter. So him and Lord Kobu continue to go back and forth about his innocence, and then Konohamaru gets kinda bold. He tells him that at the time of the interrogation, he hated and resented Boruto, but now he feels like there's some inconsistencies of Boruto's image. And that's because of Boruto saving Konohamaru's life. He changed his perspective on him. And not only saving his life, when you put everything together, you'll find out that Boruto has actually made several efforts to keep Konoha safe, which includes fighting the Shinju, running code out of Konoha, etc. So this is what Konohamaru means. The image that they're placing on Boruto is inconsistent with his actions. They portray him as a traitor, but doesn't have any physical evidence, nor are they willing to listen to Boruto's side of the story without immediately snapping on him. So of course I agree with Konohamaru here. And we see Lord Kobu's response is what's expected. He's surprised that he has the gall to even say this in a situation like this. But he does come to the conclusion that he's not the mole because of his tactless nature, stating that he's not intelligent enough to be a mole. Kind of a backhanded compliment, I guess. Then after this, Shikamaru gets a hold of Konohamaru via mind transmission. Shikamaru immediately tells Konohamaru the truth. He's the mole, but he should know why he let Boruto go. So then Shikamaru asks Konohamaru to lend him his strength, basically join them in saving the planet. He wants Konohamaru to go against the system. In other words, become a singularity of fate. After this, they kind of leave us on a cliffhanger, but I think Konohamaru will accept the proposition. He's already showing signs of rebellion. He doesn't agree with the way Konoha is doing things or portraying Boruto. And now, knowing that Shikamaru is on game, I don't believe there should be a reason why he would decline this offer from Shikamaru. So that's another plot point that I'm very excited to see later on. Now we transition back to Sarada, Sumire, and Ada. Sumire says that she has to go back to the lab. And then Sarada's like, yeah, I should also get going then. But Ada doesn't want her to leave. So she like playfully holds her hostage. And be mindful, there's a very specific reason Ikimoto is doing this. Letting Sumire leave but keeping Sarada there. I dissect the story right down to the bone, so I can kind of see things before they even happen. And I'm pretty sure some of you could see it too. But that's all I'm gonna say on that for right now, because we have to get through the last part of the chapter. Sumire exits the house and she's greeted with Boruto. And if you watched my last video, then you're familiar with this part of the chapter. He pulls out his sword and explains one of his abilities to Sumire that he learned from Sasuke. The technique is called Uchiha Sword Style Cloak Sword. The ability to coat the blade of your sword in chakra so it doesn't get nicked or dull. Boruto stated that he cracked his sword against Jura because he let his guard down for a moment. So now he's asking Sumire to fix it for him. He actually gives her a scroll that possesses information of a technique she learns in the future. He wants her to apply this to the sword when she repairs it. So like I stated before, we know that Boruto got this information from Koji's prescience ability. He's giving Sumire this information that he learned from the future to accelerate her growth. Basically give her information she learns in the future and informing her of it so she can study it more and improve her efficiency with this technique. It's the same thing that Koji did for Boruto and Boruto did for Kawaki. Yes, this does change the timeline, but for the sake of the future, some changes have to be made. So Sumire agrees to fix Boruto's sword for him, but before leaving, she urges him to call her by her real name instead of Class Prez. Boruto kinda gives a confused expression as Sumire runs off with his sword. Now we get the last panel of the chapter, which takes place a few days later, and it's Mamushi getting ready to enter Konoha. He tells all his clones to hide their chakra signature so they don't get detected by Konoha's sensory unit, which he calls his demon window. And then that's the end of the chapter. So it's very obvious next chapter will officially begin the Mamushi invasion arc. We know what steps Konoha is going to take to eliminate Mamushi, and because it's a few days later, a lot of things probably already happened. Kawaki probably is even more powerful, Boruto has a new upgraded sword, and Inojin has mastered his new jutsu. So expect a lot, and I mean a lot of action in the next chapter. This is a very good time to start getting reinvested, and I'm talking about the more casual fans. The hardcore fans like me, been locked in from day one. But the people who constantly complain about the calm moments, here you go, just like you asked. So that's really it for the chapter review. I give this chapter a 10 out of 10. It's probably not a 10 out of 10 for most people, but I have my own criteria for how I rate chapters, and this one is perfect from start to finish. It had everything I needed and answered all the questions I had going into this chapter, and questions I had about things from even part 1, like Sarada and Sumire's omnipotence immunity. But anyway, if you like this video and don't mind seeing more like this in the near future, go ahead and like the video, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss another video like this or when I go live for chapter spoilers. And until my next one, I'll see you boys and girls later, and I'm out. Peace.